What happens when the most elite warriors on Earth encounter something beyond their understanding? When pride meets power, and arrogance faces consequences that stretch across the galaxy. This is the story of Commander Sarah Chun, a woman who walked among Earth's most dangerous predators with a secret that could reshape humanity's future. The Navy SEALs saw a small, quiet officer they could break. They saw weakness where infinite strength resided. They saw prey where the apex predator stood. But in the depths of a military K-9 facility, surrounded by starving war dogs trained to kill, Sarah would reveal a truth that would echo through the cosmos. Never underestimate what you don't understand. Never mock what you cannot comprehend. And never, ever cage something that owns the very beast you fear. The universe is vast, filled with wonders and terrors beyond human imagination. But sometimes the most extraordinary power comes disguised in the most ordinary form. Sometimes the hunter wears the mask of the hunted. This is that story. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as Commander Sarah Chun stepped out of her black sedan. At 5 feet 4 inches tall, with delicate features and wire-rimmed glasses, she looked more like a college professor than a military officer. Her uniform was crisp and perfectly pressed, but something about the way she carried herself suggested depths that most people never bothered to notice. The base buzzed with its usual morning activity. Helicopters thundered overhead while groups of SEALs jogged past in formation, their voices carrying across the parade ground in synchronized chants. Sarah walked toward the main administration building, her stride purposeful but unhurried. Several junior officers snapped to attention as she passed, recognizing her rank, if not her purpose. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Tank Rodriguez was the first to spot her entering the SEAL training compound. At 6 feet 2 and built like a linebacker, Tank had earned his nickname through sheer physical presence. He'd been with SEAL Team 7 for 12 years and had seen every type of officer the Navy could produce. This one, however, was new. Well, Tank muttered to his teammate, Petty Officer Jake Spider Morrison, who was adjusting his gear nearby. Look what the brass sent us today. Spider glanced up from his equipment check and let out a low whistle. That's our new liaison officer? Seriously? She looks like she'd break if someone sneezed too hard. Sarah approached the main desk where Sergeant First Class David Bulldog Thompson was reviewing training schedules. Bulldog was a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks and a face that had seen too many fights. When he looked up and saw Sarah, his expression shifted to barely concealed amusement. Commander Chun, I presume? Bulldog's voice carried the hint of smirk. I am Sergeant Thompson. Welcome to the real Navy. Sarah nodded politely. Thank you, Sergeant. I'm here to observe your K-9 training operations and evaluate the integration protocols for the new program. K-9 training? Tank had approached during the exchange, and his voice carried genuine surprise. Ma'am, with all due respect, are you sure you're in the right place? The dog handling isn't exactly, well, it's not office work. Around them, other SEALs began to take notice. These men were used to working with officers who commanded respect through proven combat experience or specialized expertise. Sarah Chun looked like neither. She looked like someone who'd spent her career behind a desk, pushing papers and attending meetings. I assure you, I'm exactly where I need to be, Sarah replied calmly. Her voice was soft but carried an odd undertone that Tank couldn't quite identify. I'd like to begin with a tour of your facilities, particularly the K-9 units. Spider exchanged glances with Tank. Ma'am, our dogs aren't exactly friendly. These aren't household pets. They're weapons. Trained killers. I understand that completely, Sarah said. There was something in her eyes now, a flicker of something that made Bulldog pause for just a moment. But then she adjusted her glasses, and the moment passed. The tour began with the standard facilities. Sarah followed the team through the administrative areas, taking notes on a small tablet and asking occasional questions about procedures and protocols. The SEALs answered her queries with the minimum courtesy required by military protocol, but Their attitudes ranged from amused condescension to outright skepticism. As they walked, Tank couldn't help but make comments just loud enough for his teammates to hear. "Hope she doesn't faint when she sees the dogs," he muttered. "Probably thinks they're like the golden retrievers back home." Spider chuckled. $20, says she asked to pet one. "You're on," Tank replied. They reached the outdoor training area where several handlers were working with their canine partners. The dogs were magnificent specimens: German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and Dutch Shepherds, all bred and trained for military operations. Each animal was a perfectly tuned instrument of controlled aggression, capable of taking down armed enemies or detecting explosives with equal efficiency. Sarah watched the training exercises with apparent fascination. The dogs moved with fluid grace, responding to their handlers' commands with split-second precision. When ordered to attack the padded training dummy, they struck with devastating force, their powerful jaws clamping down with bone-crushing pressure. "Impressive," Sarah commented. "What's their bite force?" "Depends on the breed," explained Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, one of the K-9 handlers. "The Malinois can hit around 195 psi. The German Shepherd's a bit more. They're trained to disable, not kill, but they could certainly do serious damage if necessary." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "And their pack behavior? How do they interact when grouped together?" Santos looked surprised by the question. "Well, they maintain their pack instincts to some degree. We have to be careful about dominance displays and territorial behavior." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious about their natural hierarchies," Sarah replied. "In the wild, pack dynamics are fascinating. The alpha structure, the way they establish dominance through subtle cues rather than outright aggression." Tank rolled his eyes. "Ma'am, these aren't wild animals. They're soldiers." "Of course," Sarah agreed. "But their base instincts remain, don't they? The foundation is still there underneath all the training." The group continued through the facility, visiting the kennels, the medical bay, and the equipment storage areas. Sarah asked detailed questions about feeding schedules, exercise routines, and behavioral modification techniques. Her knowledge seemed surprisingly extensive for someone who was supposedly just an administrative liaison. "You seem to know quite a bit about K-9 operations," Santos observed during a quiet moment. "I've done my research," Sarah replied simply. As the afternoon wore on, the SEALs' initial amusement began to shift toward irritation. Sarah's presence felt intrusive to them, a reminder that the brass was sending desk jockeys to evaluate their operations. Tank, in particular, seemed to take her presence as a personal affront. "So, Commander," he said as they finished touring the main facilities, "what exactly qualifies you to evaluate our program? Have you ever worked with military dogs before?" Sarah turned to face him directly. For just a moment, Tank felt an odd sensation, like he was being studied by something far more intelligent than he'd initially assumed. But then Sarah smiled politely, and the feeling passed. "I have experience with canine behavior," she said. "More than you might expect." Spider laughed. "Let me guess, you had a dog growing up? Maybe took some classes at the local community college." "Something like that," Sarah replied. The tension in the group was palpable now. These men were used to respect, and Sarah's presence felt like an insult to their expertise. Tank made a decision that would change everything. "You know what, Commander?" he said, his voice taking on a challenging tone. "Why don't we show you our special training area? The one where we test the dogs under extreme conditions." Santos looked uncomfortable. "Tank, I don't think that's necessary, Dash." No. Tank interrupted. "The commander wants to evaluate our operations, right? She should see everything, especially how the dogs behave when they're really hungry and aggressive." Sarah tilted her head slightly. "I'd be very interested in that." Tank's grin was predatory. "Excellent. Follow me." They walked toward the far end of the compound, where a separate facility stood apart from the main buildings. This was the high-stress training area, where dogs were tested under extreme conditions that simulated combat scenarios. It was also where problematic animals were held for evaluation and potential reconditioning. "This is where we keep the dogs that are between assignments," Tank explained as they approached a series of reinforced kennels. Some of them have been without regular feeding schedules for training purposes. Makes them more aggressive, more focused. The kennels held 6 large dogs, all showing signs of agitation and hunger. They paced restlessly behind the chain-link barriers, their eyes tracking every movement with predatory intensity. When they saw the humans approaching, several began to growl low in their throats. These particular dogs have been selected out of the regular program, Tank continued. Too aggressive for normal operations, but perfect for testing how someone handles extreme situations. Sarah approached one of the kennels slowly. The dog inside, with a massive German shepherd with scars across its muzzle and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. When it saw Sarah, it pressed against the fence and snarled, showing teeth designed to tear flesh from bone. "Beautiful animal," Sarah said softly. "What's his name?" "That's Reaper," Santos replied reluctantly. "He was pulled from active duty after he attacked his last handler. We're still deciding what to do with him." Sarah extended her hand toward the fence. Every seal present tensed, expecting Reaper to try to bite through the chain link. Instead, something strange happened. Reaper's snarling stopped. His ears, which had been flat against his head, pricked forward. He sniffed at the air near Sarah's hand, and his entire demeanor began to change. "Interesting," Sarah murmured. Tank felt a chill run down his spine, though he couldn't have explained why. "Ma'am, maybe you should step back. He's not aggressive," Sarah interrupted. "He's afraid." "Afraid?" Spider laughed nervously. "Lady, that dog has put 2 handlers in the hospital. He's not afraid of anything." Sarah turned to look at Spider, and for a split second, her eyes reflected the afternoon sunlight in a way that was distinctly inhuman. Spider blinked, convinced he'd imagined it. "You'd be surprised," Sarah said quietly, "what even the most dangerous predators are afraid of." Tank had had enough. This whole situation was spiraling beyond his control, and he needed to reassert dominance. These dogs were his domain, and some pencil-pushing officer wasn't going to make him look foolish in front of his team. "You know what, Commander?" Tank said, his voice hard with decision. "I think you need a real education in what we deal with here. How about we put you in with one of these dogs? Let you see firsthand what they're capable of." Santos stepped forward immediately. "Tank, absolutely not. That's completely against protocol. The commander wants to evaluate our operations," Tank continued, ignoring Santos's protests. "She thinks she understands these animals. Let's see how she handles a real test." The other SEALs looked uncomfortable now. What had started as hazing was moving into dangerous territory. But Tank's challenge had been issued publicly, and backing down would mean losing face in front of the team. Sarah considered Tank's words carefully. Around her, she could sense the pack dynamics at play, not just among the dogs, but among the humans as well. Tank was asserting his dominance, trying to put her in her place through intimidation and potential harm. It was behavior she recognized from countless species across countless worlds. "Which pin did you have in mind?" she asked calmly. Tank's grin returned, but it held no warmth. "How about Reaper? Since you two seem to have bonded." Santos started to protest again, but Sarah held up a hand. "It's all right, Sergeant Santos. I appreciate the concern, but I think this might be educational for everyone." Tank moved toward the kennel controls. "Just so we're clear, Commander, once I open this gate, you'll be in a confined space with a 200-pound killing machine that hasn't been fed in 18 hours. Are you sure you want to do this?" Sarah removed her glasses and handed them to Santos. Without the wire rims, her face looked different somehow, sharper, more defined. When she looked directly at Tank, he felt that strange chill again. "I'm sure," Sarah said simply. Tank's hand hesitated for just a moment on the kennel release. Something deep in his hindbrain was screaming warnings, telling him this was a mistake. But pride and momentum carried him forward. He pulled the lever. The kennel gate swung open with a metallic clang. Reaper emerged slowly, his massive frame filling the doorway. His eyes fixed on Sarah immediately, and he took a step forward. Then another. The SEALs watched in tense silence, several reaching instinctively for their sidearms despite knowing they couldn't fire in the confined space without risking Sarah's life. Sarah stood perfectly still in the center of the pen. Reaper approached to within 3 feet and stopped. His nostrils flared as he scented the air around her, and his head tilted in confusion. Then, something extraordinary happened. Reaper's tail began to wag. Not the excited wagging of a happy pet, but the cautious, submissive motion of an animal recognizing superior authority. The massive dog lowered his head and whined softly, a sound none of the seals had ever heard from him before. Sarah extended her hand slowly, and Reaper pressed his scarred muzzle into her palm. She scratched behind his ears gently, and the supposedly vicious killer leaned into her touch like an overgrown puppy. "Good boy," Sarah whispered. Tank stared in disbelief. "That's impossible. No one can handle him like that." Sarah continued to pet Reaper, who was now sitting calmly at her feet, his eyes closed in contentment. "Animals respond to confidence and understanding," she said. "Fear makes them aggressive. Respect makes them loyal." She looked up at Tank, and this time there was no mistaking the predatory intelligence in her gaze. "The same is true for all pack animals. Wouldn't you agree, Chief Rodriguez?" Tank felt the blood drain from his face. Something was happening here that he didn't understand, something that challenged every assumption he'd made about the small woman standing in the pen with a killer dog acting like a house pet. "How are you doing that?" Spider whispered. Sarah smiled, and for just a moment, her teeth seemed sharper than they should be. "I have a way with animals." Around the compound, other dogs had begun to react to Sarah's presence. In kennels throughout the facility, supposedly vicious military dogs were pressing against their gates, whining and pawing at the chain link. It was as if every canine within a quarter mile was responding to some signal that only they could perceive. Santos checked her watch nervously. "Ma'am, perhaps we should wrap this up?" "The evening feeding schedule dash, of course," Sarah agreed. She gave Reaper one final pat and stood to leave the pen. The massive dog watched her go with almost human disappointment, then lay down in the exact spot where she'd been standing. As Sarah exited the kennel, Tank slammed the gate shut with more force than necessary. He was rattled, though he couldn't have explained why. Everything he thought he knew about animal behavior, about dominance and control, had just been turned upside down by a woman who looked like she couldn't bench press her own body weight. "Impressive display, Commander," he said, trying to regain his composure. "Though I'm not sure what that proves about our operational procedures." Sarah put her glasses back on, and instantly she looked like the mild-mannered officer she'd appeared to be when she first arrived. "It proves that understanding is more powerful than force, Chief Rodriguez, and that assumptions can be dangerous." As they walked back toward the main facility, Sarah fell into step beside Santos. "Sergeant, I'd like to review your incident reports for the past 6 months, particularly any involving unusual animal behavior or handler injuries." "Of course, ma'am. May I ask why?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Because I think your problem isn't with the dogs, Sergeant. I think your problem is that no one has been speaking their language." Behind them, the sound of dogs howling began to rise from kennels throughout the compound. It started with just one voice, then joined by another, then another, until the entire facility resonated with their calls. It was a sound the SEALs had never heard before. Not aggressive or fearful, but something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like recognition. Tank listened to the howling and felt that chill again, deeper this time. He had the distinct impression that he'd just made a serious mistake, though he couldn't identify exactly what it was. As Sarah's sedan disappeared into the evening traffic, he made a mental note to dig into her personnel file. Something about Commander Sarah Chun didn't add up, and Tank had spent too many years in dangerous situations to ignore his instincts. What he would discover would change everything he thought he knew about the chain of command and about what exactly the Navy had sent to evaluate their operations. Tank sat in the dim light of his apartment that evening, laptop open on the kitchen table, diving deep into classified personnel databases. His security clearance gave him access to most military records, but what he found about Commander Sarah Chun only raised more questions. Her service record was spotless, but oddly sparse. Born in San Francisco, graduated summa cum laude from UC Berkeley with degrees in biochemistry and animal behavior. Military service beginning 8 years ago with rapid promotion through the ranks. Multiple commendations for classified operations that Tank couldn't access, even with his clearance level. But it was what wasn't in the file that bothered him most. No family contacts listed. No emergency contacts beyond a military attorney. No previous addresses beyond her current posting. It was as if Sarah Chun had materialized fully formed into the military system 8 years ago with no past. Tank picked up his phone and dialed Spider. "Morrison, you still up?" "Yeah, what's going on?" "Still thinking about our mystery commander. Something's not right about her file, man. It's too clean. Nobody's record is this perfect." Spider was quiet for a moment. "You think she's intelligence? CIA maybe? Maybe. Or maybe something else entirely." Tank stared at his laptop screen, remembering the way Reaper had responded to Sarah's touch. "Did you see what happened with that dog today? I've never seen anything like it." "Yeah, that was weird. But some people just have a way with animals, you know?" Tank wasn't convinced. He'd worked with the best animal handlers in the military, and none of them could have done what Sarah did with Reaper. The dog had been on the verge of being put down for aggressive behavior, and she'd turned him into a lap pet in seconds. Meanwhile, across the base at the BOQ, Sarah stood in her Spartanly furnished room, looking out at the lights of the training compound. She felt the SEALs' hostility today, their need to test and challenge her authority. It was predictable behavior from apex predators defending their territory. What they didn't understand was that she wasn't there to challenge their dominance. She was there to protect them from something much more dangerous than they could imagine. Sarah opened her secure laptop and activated an encrypted communication channel. The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure she knew well, Admiral Patricia Morrison, head of Naval Special Operations Command. "Report, Commander," the Admiral said without preamble. "Initial contact established. The SEAL teams are responding as expected, suspicious but not yet hostile. I've begun preliminary assessment of the K-9 units." Admiral Morrison leaned forward. "And what's your evaluation of the situation?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "The readings from the Pacific Fleet are definitely connected to the K-9 behavioral anomalies. The dogs are responding to something that the humans can't perceive yet. If my suspicions are correct, we may have a much bigger problem than unusual animal behavior." "How much bigger?" "Large enough to require full disclosure protocols if the situation escalates. The SEAL teams need to be briefed on Xenomorph Defense Classification Alpha." Admiral Morrison's expression grew grave. "You're certain?" "Not yet, but the patterns match previous encounters. Dogs are always the first to sense them. Their olfactory and auditory range picks up the initial scout signals days before human detection equipment registers anything." "How long do you estimate before first contact?" Sarah looked out her window toward the ocean, where strange lights had been reported by fishing vessels over the past week. 48 hours, maybe less. Then, you need to establish operational command immediately. Those SEALs need to understand who they're really dealing with. That may be complicated. They're not responding well to standard authority structures. The pack leader, Chief Rodriguez, challenged me directly today. He put me in a containment pen with an aggressive K-9. Admiral Morrison's eyebrows shot up. "He did what? Are you injured?" Sarah smiled slightly. "No," I admitted. "If anything, the encounter was educational for everyone involved. But it confirmed that subtle integration won't work with this group. They respond to strength and direct challenge. Then, give them what they understand. Your secondary authorization is now active, Commander. Full operational discretion." The screen went dark, and Sarah closed the laptop. She'd hoped to handle this assignment through conventional military channels, but the SEALs had forced her hand. Tomorrow would be very different from today. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Sarah arrived at the base earlier than expected, dressed in combat fatigues instead of her usual administrative uniform. The change was immediately noticed by the gate guards, who snapped to attention with more genuine respect than she'd received the previous day. Tank was already in the K9 compound when Sarah arrived, reviewing training schedules with Santos. He looked up as she approached and immediately noticed something different about her bearing. She moved with a predator's grace now, each step deliberate and controlled. "Morning, Commander," Tank said, his tone carefully neutral. "Different look today." "Different day," Sarah replied simply. "I need all K9 handlers and SEAL team leaders in the main briefing room in 15 minutes. Tank exchanged glances with Santos. "Ma'am, we have scheduled training exercises cancel them. This takes priority." There was something in Sarah's voice that brooked no argument. Tank found himself nodding before he realized he'd agreed. "Yes, ma'am. I'll gather the team." Within 15 minutes, 12 of the base's most elite operators were seated around the briefing room table. Tank had managed to pull together representatives from 3 different SEAL teams, along with the primary K9 handlers. The mood was skeptical. These men weren't used to taking orders from unknown quantities. Sarah stood at the front of the room, having connected her laptop to the main display screen. "Gentlemen, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Before we begin, everyone needs to acknowledge their security clearances and sign additional NDAs." Spider raised his hand. "Ma'am, with respect, what exactly are we being briefed on? This seems a bit excessive for K9 training evaluation." Sarah looked directly at him. "We're not here to discuss K9 training, Petty Officer Morrison. We're here to discuss why your dogs have been exhibiting unusual behavior patterns and what that means for the security of this base and potentially the entire Pacific coast." She clicked to the first slide, which showed a map of the Pacific Ocean with several marked locations. Over the past 2 weeks, fishing vessels, cargo ships, and naval patrol craft have reported unusual phenomena in these areas. Lights beneath the water surface, sonar contacts that disappear without explanation, and electromagnetic anomalies that interfere with navigation equipment. Tank leaned forward. "You're talking about UFOs?" "I'm talking about unidentified subaquatic objects," Sarah corrected. "And before anyone dismisses this as science fiction, you should know that your own dogs have been responding to these phenomena since they began." She clicked to the next slide, showing behavioral data from the base's K9 units. Increased agitation, disrupted sleep patterns, changes in appetite, and heightened alertness during specific time periods that correspond exactly with the reported oceanic anomalies. Santos studied the data with growing concern. "I thought it was just stress from the new training regimens. Dogs can detect electromagnetic frequencies and subsonic vibrations that humans can't perceive," Sarah continued. "They're essentially serving as an early warning system for something approaching from the ocean." Bulldog, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Commander, assuming this is all accurate, what does it have to do with us? If there's a threat, why aren't the Coast Guard and regular Navy handling it?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "Because based on our analysis of the contact patterns and the animal behavioral responses, we believe this represents a species with advanced technology attempting initial reconnaissance before potential first contact." The room fell silent. Tank felt his worldview shifting in fundamental ways. "You're saying we're dealing with aliens?" "I'm saying we're dealing with an unknown intelligence that possesses capabilities beyond our current understanding. And based on historical precedent from similar encounters, they're likely to make initial contact through military installations on the coast." Spider shook his head. "This is insane. You're talking about actual extraterrestrial contact." Sarah clicked to another slide, showing grainy photographs from various military encounters over the decades. The United States government has been tracking and occasionally interacting with non-terrestrial intelligences since the 1940s. What makes this situation unique is the apparent sophistication of their approach and their specific interest in canine behavior patterns. She paused, letting that information sink in. Previous contact attempts have been brief and typically involved isolated rural areas. This time, they're taking time to study our domesticated animals, which suggests they're planning longer-term interaction. Tank's mind was reeling, but his training kicked in. Okay, let's say we accept all of this. What's our role? What are we supposed to do? Sarah looked around the room, meeting each man's eyes. Your role is to serve as the primary contact team if and when they attempt direct communication. Your canine units may be the key to establishing peaceful relations. Why us? Bulldog asked. Why not scientists or diplomats? Because they're approaching through military channels, Sarah replied. Their reconnaissance patterns suggest they understand our command structure and respect strength. They want to communicate with warriors, not politicians. Santos raised her hand tentatively. Ma'am, you keep saying they. How much do we actually know about these beings? Sarah hesitated for the first time since beginning the briefing. We know they're highly intelligent, technologically advanced, and have been observing human civilization for decades. We know they're curious about our relationship with domesticated animals, particularly dogs. And we know they're planning to make contact within the next 24 to 48 hours. Tank felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. What kind of contact are we talking about? Landing on the beach? Radio transmission? Unknown. But based on the behavioral patterns we've observed in your canine units, they're likely to approach the base directly. The dogs aren't showing fear responses. They're showing recognition patterns, almost as if they've encountered these beings before. The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air. Spider was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. Are you suggesting our dogs have already made contact? Sarah nodded slowly. It's possible. Canines exist on a sensory level that humans can't fully comprehend. They may have been communicating with these beings for days without us realizing it. She clicked to the final slide, showing the current base layout with strategic positions marked. This is why I need your full cooperation. If contact occurs, it needs to happen in a controlled environment with proper security and communication protocols. Your K-9 partners may be the translators we need. Tank stood up, his mind made up. Commander, what are your orders? Sarah felt a surge of respect for the Big SEAL. Despite his initial hostility and the incredible nature of what she'd just revealed, he was ready to follow orders and protect his country. First, we establish a secure perimeter around the K-9 compound. Second, we brief your dog's handlers on new protocols for interpreting animal behavior. Third, we wait. Bulldog raised his hand. Ma'am, assuming this contact happens, what's our rules of engagement? Are we treating these beings as friendlies, neutrals, or potential hostiles? That's the critical question, Sarah admitted. We don't know their intentions. They could be explorers, refugees, or advanced scouts for an invasion force. Our response in the first few minutes of contact could determine the future relationship between humanity and an advanced alien civilization. Tank felt the enormous weight of responsibility settling over the room. Commander, I have to ask, what's your background with this kind of situation? How do you know so much about alien contact protocols? Sarah looked at him for a long moment, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Let's just say this isn't my first assignment involving non-terrestrial contact. I've been specially trained for exactly this type of scenario. Spider leaned forward. How many times has this happened before? More than you'd think, less than would cause panic if it became public knowledge. Most encounters have been brief and inconclusive. This situation appears to be different, more deliberate, more organized. Santos asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Are we ready for this? I mean, really ready. Sarah's expression was grim, but determined. We're as ready as anyone can be for first contact with an unknown species. Your training, your bonds with your K-9 partners, and your ability to think tactically under pressure. Those are our best advantages. She began shutting down her laptop. You have 2 hours to brief your teams and prepare the compound. I want full tactical gear, but weapons set to non-lethal unless directly threatened. Remember, gentlemen, we may be about to make history. As the SEALs filed out of the briefing room, Tank lingered behind. Commander, there's something else, isn't there? Something you're not telling us. Sarah met his gaze directly. There always is, Chief. But right now, you have everything you need to do your job. Focus on that. Tank nodded, but as he headed toward the door, Sarah called his name. Chief Rodriguez? Yes, ma'am. Yesterday you tested me by putting me in with an aggressive dog. Today, something much more dangerous than Reaper might be testing all of us. I hope you're ready. Tank felt that familiar chill, but this time it was mixed with something else, respect. We'll be ready, Commander. Whatever's coming, we'll be ready. As he left the briefing room, Tank realized that everything he'd thought he knew about his mission, his base, and even his planet was about to change forever. The small woman he'd mocked yesterday was preparing them for humanity's next giant leap. He just hoped they were worthy of the challenge. The storm that had been building all morning finally broke just after noon, sending sheets of rain across the naval base. Tank stood in the K-9 Compound Command Center, watching his teams make final preparations while thunder rolled overhead. The weather felt appropriate for what might be humanity's first official contact with alien intelligence. Sarah moved through the compound like a woman possessed, checking equipment, reviewing protocols, and coordinating with handlers. She'd changed again since the morning briefing. Not just her clothing, but her entire presence. The mild-mannered liaison officer was gone, replaced by someone who radiated competence and barely contained energy. Status report, she called as she entered the command center. Santos looked up from her monitoring station. All K-9 units are showing increased agitation levels. Heart rates elevated, but not in distress patterns. It's more like anticipation. Contact, ETA? Tank asked. Sarah checked her watch and the sophisticated detection equipment that had been quietly installed around the compound. Based on the oceanic movement patterns and the dog's behavioral escalation, I'd estimate less than 4 hours. Spider approached from the communication station. Commander, I've got reports coming in from fishing boats about 12 miles out. They're seeing lights under the water, moving in formation toward shore. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. How many vessels reporting contact? 7 so far. Coast Guards receive calls from everything from sport fishing boats to commercial trawlers. Whatever's down there, it's big enough and bright enough to be seen from the surface. Tanks studied the tactical display, showing their defensive positions. Any indication of hostile intent? Negative, Sarah replied. If they wanted to cause damage, they wouldn't announce their approach with light displays. This feels like a formal procession. Bulldog entered the command center, water dripping from his rain gear. Perimeter secure, Commander. We've got overlapping fields of fire, but, per your orders, everything's set to non-lethal unless we receive direct threat indicators. Good. Sarah turned to address the full team. Listen carefully, everyone. What's about to happen will likely be the most important event in human history. But for us, right now, it's a military operation. Stay focused, follow protocols, and remember that our response in the next few hours could shape the relationship between Earth and an alien civilization. Tank checked his weapon one final time. Ma'am, assuming they're peaceful, what exactly are we supposed to do? Shake hands? Salute. Sarah's expression was serious. We let the dogs lead. Every encounter we've studied suggests that these beings understand canine behavior better than they understand human behavior. Trust your K-9 partners. They'll know what to do. As if summoned by her words, Reaper began to howl from his kennel. Within seconds, every dog in the compound had joined him, creating a chorus that rose above the storm. But this wasn't the chaotic noise of distressed animals. It was organized, almost musical. Santos stared at her monitoring equipment in amazement. Commander, you need to see this. The howling, it's not random. There's a pattern like they're responding to something. Sarah moved to Santos' station and studied the audio waveform displays. The dogs were indeed howling in sequence, with specific tonal patterns that repeated every 30 seconds. They're communicating, broadcasting some kind of response signal. Response to what? Tank asked. Before Sarah could answer, the lights in the command center flickered. Then, the radio crackled with an incoming transmission, but not from any human source. The voice that emerged from the speakers was clearly artificial, speaking in perfectly enunciated English with an odd harmonic undertone. United States Naval Facility, this is Diplomatic Contact Vessel Harmony of the Deep Current. We request permission to approach for peaceful communication exchange. The command center fell silent except for the continued howling of the dogs. Tank looked at Sarah, who had gone very still. Mom. Sarah moved to the communications console. This is Commander Sarah Chun, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. State your intentions and origin. Commander Chun, we are exploratory ambassadors from the Aquatic Federation of the Cetacean Alliance. We come seeking dialogue with the surface dwellers who share kinship with the four-legged singing ones. Spider's mouth dropped open. The what now? Sarah's mind raced as she processed the implications of what she'd just heard. Aquatic Federation, they're not from space. They're from here, from our own oceans. Tank felt his worldview shift again. You're saying they're what? Underwater aliens that have been living on Earth. Commander Chun, the voice continued, we have been monitoring your facility because the singing ones show recognition patterns. We believe you have established successful partnership with land-dwelling pack hunters. This suggests compatibility for communication. Sarah keyed the microphone. Harmony of the deep current. We are prepared for peaceful contact. What are your specific requirements? We request permission to approach your canine partnership facility for initial dialogue. Our sensors indicate the presence of human-trained pack leaders and their four-legged companions. This is optimal configuration for first communication exchange. Tank looked at his team, then at Sarah. Commander, are we really doing this? Sarah nodded grimly. Open the main gates. All personnel to secondary positions. Weapons lowered, but ready. K9 handlers, bring your partners to the main assembly area. As the team began moving to their positions, Santos called out from her station. Commander, I'm picking up sonar signatures approaching the beach. Multiple contacts, but they're not showing typical submarine profiles. Tank grabbed his binoculars and headed for the observation post. Through the rain and storm, he could see lights moving beneath the water just beyond the surf line. They were arranged in a perfect formation, pulsing in synchronized patterns that somehow reminded him of the dog's howling. Visual contact, he reported. Whatever they are, they're maintaining formation about 50 meters offshore. Sarah joined him at the observation post. The lights were growing brighter, and now she could see shapes moving beneath them, sleek forms that seemed to dance through the water with impossible grace. They're beautiful, she whispered. Contact breaking surface, Spider called from his position. Through his binoculars, Tank watched as something emerged from the waves. At first, he thought it was some kind of advanced submarine, but as more of the craft became visible, he realized he was looking at something far more organic. The vessel was shaped like an enormous manta ray, easily 200 feet across, with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed along its edges. Mother of God, Bulldog breathed from his position. That thing is alive. More vessels surfaced around the first, each one unique, but sharing the same organic, flowing design. They moved through the water with undulating motions that were clearly biological rather than mechanical. As they approached the shore, the vehicles began to emit complex harmonics that the dogs responded to with excited barking and tail wagging. Sarah activated her communicator. All teams, remember, we're making first contact with representatives of an intelligence that's been sharing our planet for possibly thousands of years. Show respect, but maintain security protocols. The lead vessel reached the beach and gracefully transitioned from swimming to what could only be described as walking. For fin-like appendages extended from its underside and supported its weight as it moved onto the sand. The bioluminescent patterns shifted and changed, creating a light show that was both alien and strangely beautiful. Tank couldn't take his eyes off the approaching delegation. Commander, they're heading directly for the K9 compound. Of course they are, Sarah replied. The dogs are the key to all of this. A section of the lead vessel's surface suddenly dilated like an iris, revealing an opening from which figures began to emerge. Tank adjusted his binoculars and felt his breath catch. The beings were humanoid in basic structure, but clearly adapted for aquatic life. They stood about 7 feet tall with elongated limbs and fingers that showed obvious webbing. Their skin had an iridescent quality that shifted between blue and green, and they moved with a fluid grace that spoke of complete comfort in both water and air. What struck Tank most was their faces. While clearly non-human, they possessed expressions of intelligence and curiosity that were somehow familiar. Large eyes that seemed to hold depths like the ocean itself, and features that suggested both ancient wisdom and childlike wonder. Teams, hold your positions, Sarah commanded as the alien delegation approached the compound gates. Let them come to us. The lead being stopped about 10 feet from the main entrance and spoke, its voice carrying clearly across the compound despite the storm. Commander Chun, I am Deep Singer, Ambassador of the Aquatic Federation. We are grateful for your willingness to engage in dialogue. Sarah stepped forward, flanked by Tank and Santos with Reaper and 2 other K9s. Welcome to Earth's surface, Deep Singer. We are honored by your presence. Deep Singer's attention immediately focused on the dogs, and something remarkable happened. The alien being lowered itself to one knee and extended a webbed hand toward Reaper. The supposedly vicious military dog approached without hesitation, tail wagging, and gently sniffed the offered hand before allowing himself to be petted. Magnificent, Deep Singer said, its voice filled with genuine wonder. The 4-legged ones maintain their ancient songs even in your surface realm. They remember the deep melodies from when all were one. Tank found his voice. You're saying our dogs know you somehow? Deep Singer looked up at Tank with those impossibly deep eyes. All pack hunters share common origin frequencies, surface warrior. Your companions retain harmonics from the time before the Great Separation, when land and sea were not divided territories. Another member of the alien delegation approached, this one smaller and with more pronounced bioluminescent patterns. I am Tidecaller, xenological specialist. We have studied your bonding practices with the 4-legged ones. It demonstrates evolution beyond territorial competition towards symbiotic cooperation. This suggests your species has potential for broader alliance. Sarah felt pieces of an enormous puzzle beginning to fall into place. You've been watching us for a long time. Since your kind first built vessels that traveled upon the deep currents, Deep Singer confirmed. We observed your development with interest, particularly your unique relationship with pack hunters. No other surface species has achieved such profound interspecies partnership. Santos stepped forward hesitantly, her K9 partner at her side. Are there others like you? Other intelligent species in the oceans? Tidecaller's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what might have been amusement. The deep currents hold many intelligences, surface dweller. We are perhaps the most similar to your kind in curiosity and social structure. Others are different in ways that would challenge your understanding. Tank felt compelled to ask the obvious question. Why now? Why make contact now instead of 10 years ago or 100 years ago? Deep Singer's expression grew serious. Because the deep currents bring warnings of changes that will affect both surface and depth. The great waters grow warm and angry. Chemical changes alter the foundation songs of life itself. Our realm and yours face challenges that require cooperation. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. You're talking about climate change, ocean acidification, environmental collapse. Among other concerns, Deep Singer confirmed. Your surface civilization possesses tools and knowledge that could aid in restoration. Our people possess understanding of deep current systems and biological harmony that could guide your efforts. Separately, both our kinds face extinction. Together, we might achieve preservation. The weight of that statement settled over the assembled humans. Tank looked around at his team, seeing the same realization in their eyes. This wasn't just first contact, it was a recruitment call for planetary survival. Bulldog stepped forward. What exactly are you proposing? Tidecaller gestured toward the ocean where more vessels could be seen approaching. Formal alliance between surface and depth civilizations. Shared knowledge, coordinated effort to restore the great waters to health. Your pack hunters would serve as communication facilitators. They understand both your language and our harmonic patterns. Sarah felt the full magnitude of the moment. You want to establish a permanent diplomatic relationship using our canine units as translators. More than translators, Deep Singer corrected. Partners in a new age of cooperation. The four-legged ones have always bridged realms. Now, they would bridge species. Tank looked down at Reaper, who was sitting calmly beside Deep Singer as if the alien ambassador was just another handler. And if we agree to this alliance, then your kind gains access to knowledge accumulated over millennia of ocean stewardship. Techniques for purifying water, for encouraging beneficial biological growth, for predicting and managing the great currents that control your surface weather patterns. Deep Singer stood, towering over the assembled humans, but managing to convey respect rather than intimidation. In exchange, we would gain access to your manufacturing capabilities, your computational technologies, and your remarkable ability to adapt various species for cooperative partnerships. Sarah realized that this moment would echo through human history forever. The decision made here by a handful of Navy SEALs and their K-9 partners in a Stormlash compound could reshape civilization itself. We need to consult with our leadership, she said carefully. This alliance you propose would require approval at the highest levels of government. Of course, Deep Singer agreed. But the foundation must be established here, with warriors who understand both honor and the bonds between species. Your political leaders will require proof that such cooperation is possible. Tide, caller, gestured toward the approaching vessels. We propose a trial period. A small number of our people working with your pack hunters and handlers to establish communication protocols and demonstrate the benefits of alliance. Tank felt destiny settling around him like a cloak. How small a number? 12 of our finest xenological specialists, working with 12 of your human canine partnerships. Sufficient to prove the concept while maintaining security for both sides. Sarah looked around at her team. These men had signed up to defend their country from human enemies. Now, they were being asked to help forge the future of their species. What do you think, Chief Rodriguez? Tank looked at Reaper, still calmly accepting attention from an alien being who until an hour ago existed only in science fiction. He thought about the strange intuition that had led him to challenge Sarah the day before, and how wrong his assumptions had been about nearly everything. Ma'am, he said finally, I think our dog's already made the decision for us. As if summoned by his words, every K-9 in the compound began howling again. But this time their voices were joined by harmonics from the alien vessels, creating a song that seemed to encompass both the depths of the ocean and the heights of human ambition. The age of cooperation had begun. 3 weeks had passed since first contact, and the naval base had been transformed into humanity's first interspecies cooperation center. The K-9 compound had been expanded with specialized pools and atmospheric control systems to accommodate the Aquatic Federation delegates. What had begun as a hesitant experiment had evolved into something that surprised everyone involved. Tank stood in the newly constructed observation deck, watching Reaper work with Deep Singer in one of the communication training pools. The massive German Shepherd moved through the water with confidence that would have been impossible just weeks earlier, guided by Deep Singer's harmonious vocalizations and gentle webbed hands. Still can't believe I'm watching my attack dog learn to swim with an alien diplomat, Tank muttered to Santos, who was monitoring the session from nearby. Santos smiled as she watched her own K-9, Luna, practicing harmonic communication exercises with Tide Caller. 3 weeks ago, Luna barely tolerated bath time. Now she's practically amphibious. The progress had been remarkable. The Aquatic Federation delegates possessed an intuitive understanding of canine psychology that surpassed even the best human trainers. In return, the dogs served as perfect intermediaries, their natural pack instincts allowing them to bridge the communication gap between two radically different species. Sarah entered the observation area, carrying a stack of reports that had become her constant companion. The successful contact had triggered a cascade of activity from Washington, and she found herself coordinating between military leadership, scientific research teams, and increasingly excited politicians. "How are today's sessions progressing?" she asked. Tank gestured toward the pools below. "Better than yesterday. Reaper's starting to understand basic harmonic patterns. Deep Singer says he's demonstrating what they call resonance comprehension. And the other teams?" Santos checked her monitoring board. "All 12 partnerships are showing accelerated learning curves. The dogs are picking up the Federation's communication methods faster than we dared hope, and our people are beginning to understand the cultural concepts the Federation is trying to convey." Sarah nodded, though her expression remained troubled. The success of the program had created new challenges she hadn't anticipated. Word the Alliance was spreading through classified channels, and not everyone in the government was thrilled about humanity's first alien contact being managed by a handful of Navy SEALs and their dogs. Spider approached from the communications station. "Commander, we've got another delegation arriving from Washington. This one includes some very high-ranking people who want a personal briefing." Sarah checked her watch. "How high-ranking?" "Joint Chiefs level, plus representatives from State Department, CIA, and something called the Extraterrestrial Contact Committee that apparently didn't exist until 2 weeks ago." Tank felt his stomach tighten. "This is it, isn't it? They're going to take over the program." Sarah's expression was grim. "They're going to try, but the Federation has been very clear that they'll only work with the original contact team." Deep Singer specifically requested that any expansion of the program be gradual and maintain the current human-canine partnerships. Bulldog entered the observation area, having overheard the conversation. "What happens if Washington decides they know better? If they try to replace us with diplomats and scientists?" Before Sarah could respond, a new voice joined the conversation, one that carried the harmonic undertones that had become familiar over the past 3 weeks. "Then the cooperation would end," Deep Singer said, emerging from the pool with Reaper swimming easily beside him. "The four-legged ones have chosen their human partners. To break these bonds would be to break the foundation of understanding we have built." The alien ambassador moved with that characteristic fluid grace, water streaming from his iridescent skin as he approached the group. Reaper shook himself dry and immediately sat at Tank's side, looking perfectly content with his expanded pack that now included an aquatic being. "Deep Singer," Sarah said formally, "we need to discuss the arriving delegation. They may have expectations that conflict with the agreements we've established." Deep Singer's large eyes reflected understanding and concern. "Your surface leaders seek to impose their hierarchical structures upon our cooperation. We have observed this pattern in your broadcasts and communication intercepts." Tank was still getting used to the Federation's casual admission that they'd been monitoring human communications for decades. "Can you work with them if they insist on taking charge?" "The question is not whether we can, but whether we should," Deep Singer replied. "The four-legged ones have demonstrated that your species possesses the capacity for true partnership. But your political structures often override this capacity in favor of dominance behaviors." Tide Caller emerged from another pool, accompanied by Santos and Luna. The smaller Federation delegates' bioluminescent patterns were flickering in what the humans had learned indicated serious concern. "Troubling harmonics from the approaching vessels," Tide Caller announced. "Multiple human authority figures with conflicting territorial claims. The vibrations suggest intention to restructure established cooperation patterns." Sarah felt the weight of impossible politics settling on her shoulders. The Federation's trust had been earned through weeks of careful relationship building, but Washington operated on different timelines and priorities. "Perhaps we should arrange a controlled introduction," she suggested. "Let them observe the communication sessions before making any decisions about program changes." Deep Singer's head tilted, and the gesture the team had learned indicated deep consideration. Surface politics often prioritize speed over understanding. Will your arriving leaders possess patience for proper observation? Tank laughed grimly. Patience isn't exactly a strong point for most flag officers and cabinet secretaries. Spider's radio crackled with an incoming message. Transport helicopters requesting clearance for priority landing. ETA 5 minutes. Sarah looked around at her team, realizing that the next few hours would determine whether humanity's first alien alliance would survive its own government's interference. All right, everyone. Standard protocol. Let the visitors observe, but maintain operational security around our detailed cooperation methods. Should we move the Federation delegates to secure areas? Bulldog asked. Deep Singer's expression might have been amusement. We will remain in the observation pools. If your leaders wish to understand our cooperation, they must see it in action. Tank felt a surge of respect for the alien diplomat. You're not worried about being put under a microscope? Surface Dweller Tank, Deep Singer replied, using the formal address the Federation had adopted for each team member. We have been observing your species for centuries. It is perhaps time for your species to observe us with equal directness. The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder, and Sarah made a decision that would define the rest of the program. Everyone maintains their regular schedules. We're not putting on a show. We're demonstrating a working partnership. The dogs and Federation delegates proceed with today's planned communication exercises. Santos looked nervous. Ma'am, what if they order us to stop the sessions? Sarah's expression hardened. Then, they'll discover that this program has already evolved beyond simple military orders. The Federation isn't bound by our chain of command, and the dogs have developed loyalty patterns that include their new pack members. As if to illustrate her point, Reaper moved to stand between Tank and Deep Singer, his posture protective of both his human and alien pack mates. Around the compound, other K9S were displaying similar behaviors, treating their Federation partners as integral members of their social groups. The helicopters touched down on the main landing pad, and within minutes, a parade of high-ranking officials was making its way toward the K9 compound. Sarah recognized Admiral Chun from Naval Operations, Secretary of Defense Williams, and several faces from intelligence agencies she'd briefed over the years. Leading the group was General Harrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, whose reputation for direct action and impatience was legendary throughout the military. Commander Chun, General Harrison called as the delegation approached. I trust you're prepared to provide a comprehensive briefing on this situation. Sarah snapped to attention. Yes, sir. I recommend beginning with observation of active communication sessions to provide context for the strategic briefing. General Harrison's gaze swept across the modified compound, taking in the pools, the alien delegates, and the obviously relaxed K9 units. These are the extraterrestrial contacts. Aquatic Federation delegates, Sarah corrected gently. They're indigenous to Earth's oceans, sir. The distinction has significant implications for territorial and sovereignty issues. Secretary Williams stepped forward. Commander, we're going to need a full technical briefing on their capabilities, intentions, and potential security risks. Deep Singer's voice carried clearly across the compound as he addressed the new arrivals. Honored surface leaders, we welcome your observation of our cooperation efforts. Your subordinate warriors and their four-legged partners have demonstrated remarkable adaptation to interspecies communication. General Harrison stared at the 7-foot-tall aquatic being with obvious amazement. It speaks English. Deep Singer has been fluent in 17 human languages for over 40 years, Sarah explained. The Federation has been monitoring our communications and learning our cultures for decades. Tide Caller approached the group with Luna at his side, the dog showing no stress despite the crowd of unfamiliar humans. We possess comprehensive understanding of surface dweller social structures. Your arrival patterns indicate territorial authority assessment missions. Tank stepped forward, recognizing the need to translate Federation directness into military diplomacy. Sir, what Tide Caller means is that they understand you're here to evaluate the program and potentially reassign authority. General Harrison's expression was unreadable. And what is their position on such reassignment? Deep Singer's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what the team had learned indicated formal diplomatic mode. General Harrison, our cooperation is built upon trust relationships with specific human-canine partnerships. These bonds cannot be transferred or replicated through administrative restructuring. You're saying you won't work with anyone else? Secretary Williams asked. We are saying that the foundation of our alliance is individual trust between specific beings. Your political structures often prioritize institutional authority over personal relationships. This creates incompatibility with our social methods. Tank watched the exchange with growing tension. The Federation delegates were politely, but firmly establishing that they wouldn't simply accept whatever human leadership Washington decided to impose. General Harrison studied the alien beings with obvious military assessment. What assurances can you provide regarding your intentions toward the United States and humanity in general? Tide Caller's patterns brightened. We offer shared stewardship of the planetary ecosystem that sustains both our civilizations. Your industrial capabilities combined with our biological understanding could restore the great waters to health and ensure survival for both species. And if we decline your alliance? Admiral Chen asked. Deep Singer was quiet for a long moment before responding. Then, both our peoples continue toward extinction as the great waters die. We have observed your climate data. Without cooperation, neither surface nor depth civilizations will survive the changes already in motion. The weight of that statement settled over the assembled officials. Secretary Williams looked around at the obviously successful human-alien cooperation happening around them. How long have you been monitoring our environmental situation? Since your industrial acceleration began affecting deep current temperatures and chemical compositions. Approximately 150 of your years. General Harrison's eyebrows shot up. You've been watching us for a century and a half. We hope your species would recognize the deterioration and make corrections independently. Recent data suggests this will not occur without external cooperation. Tank realized that the Federation's contact wasn't just about establishing diplomatic relations. It was about planetary survival. The aliens weren't invaders or explorers. They were neighbors trying to prevent mutual extinction. Sarah stepped forward to address the delegation. Sir, the Federation has provided preliminary data on ocean restoration techniques that our environmental scientists believe could reverse some of the damage we've caused to marine ecosystems. But the cooperation requires long-term partnership, not just information exchange. General Harrison looked around at the K9S and their alien partners, clearly wrestling with decisions that would reshape American foreign policy forever. Commander Chun, what is your assessment of this alliance? Sarah chose her words carefully. Sir, I believe we're looking at an opportunity that won't come again. The Federation possesses knowledge that could help save our planet, and they're offering partnership instead of demanding submission. But they're also making it clear that this has to be a genuine alliance, not a takeover disguised as cooperation. Tank watched Reaper, who was calmly sitting between him and Deep Singer, completely comfortable with the situation despite the tension among the humans. The dog had accepted the alien as part of his pack without reservation, showing an adaptability that the politicians seemed to lack. General Harrison made his decision. Commander Chun, you'll continue as primary liaison, but I want daily reports and gradual integration of additional personnel as the Federation allows. We're not changing what's working, but we need to expand it carefully. Deep Singer's patterns shifted to what the team had learned indicated satisfaction. Wisdom harmonics, General Harrison. Gradual expansion maintains trust while allowing growth. The four-legged ones will assist in evaluating potential new partners. As the official delegation began their detailed observation of the cooperation sessions, Tank felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They'd survived the political challenge, but the real work of building an alliance between two civilizations was just beginning. And, somewhere in the back of his mind, He couldn't shake the feeling that the Federation's warnings about environmental collapse were more urgent than anyone was ready to admit. 6 months had passed since first contact, and the world had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Naval Amphibious Base Coronado had been transformed into the Interspecies Cooperation Institute, a sprawling complex of research facilities, diplomatic quarters, and training centers that represented humanity's first permanent alien embassy. Tank stood in the Advanced Communication Center, watching Reaper work with Deep Singer and a team of human linguists to develop new translation protocols. The dog had become something of a celebrity in scientific circles, his unique ability to interpret both human and Federation communication methods, making him an invaluable bridge between species. Remarkable progress, Dr. Elizabeth Santos said, reviewing the latest data from her position as the Institute's head of interspecies psychology. She was Maria Santos' sister, recruited from MIT when the program expanded to include civilian researchers. Reapers demonstrating cognitive abilities we never knew dogs possessed. Tank petted his canine partner, who was resting between translation sessions. Deep Singer says all dogs have these abilities. We just never learned how to recognize them. Across the facility, similar breakthroughs were occurring daily. The 12 original human-canine partnerships had expanded to 47, with canine units from around the world being selected for the program, based on psychological compatibility assessments developed jointly by human and Federation researchers. Sarah entered the communication center wearing her new uniform insignia. She'd been promoted to Admiral after the program's success became undeniable. The alliance with the Aquatic Federation had already yielded advances in ocean cleanup technology, weather prediction, and marine biology that were being implemented globally. Status report, she called, though her tone was more casual than it had been during those first tense weeks. Translation accuracy is now at 94% for standard diplomatic communications, DR. Santos reported. The K9 assisted protocols are proving more effective than any artificial intelligence system we've developed. Tank looked up from Reaper's feeding schedule. Any word from the European delegation? Sarah nodded. They're requesting their own cooperation center in the Mediterranean. The Federation has agreed, but they want our teams to help establish the initial partnerships. Spider approached from the tactical planning station where he'd been working with Tide Caller on oceanic patrol routes. Ma'am, we've got confirmation on the Pacific cleanup project. The Federation's bioengineering vessels are ready to begin the microplastic removal operations. How large-scale are we talking? Tank asked. Tide Caller's harmonious voice answered from the pool area. Initial operations will process approximately 10,000 square kilometers of surface contamination. If successful, we can scale to address the great garbage convergences within 2 of your years. Tank still marveled at the casual way the Federation discussed projects that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Their biotechnology could literally eat pollution, converting it into harmless organic compounds while generating energy for further cleanup operations. Bulldog entered the center, having just returned from Washington where he'd been briefing Congress on the program's expansion. Good news and challenging news from the Capitol, he announced. Give us the challenging news first, Sarah said. There are still elements in government who want to militarize the alliance. They're pushing for joint defense agreements and technology transfers focused on weapons applications. Deep Singer's bioluminescent patterns darkened with what the team had learned indicated serious concern. Weapon applications would terminate cooperation immediately. The Federation will not assist surface dwellers in developing new methods of destruction. Sarah had expected this challenge. What's the good news? Bulldog's expression brightened. President Martinez wants to announce the alliance publicly next month. Full disclosure to the world about the Federation's existence and our cooperation efforts. Tank felt his stomach drop. Public announcement? Are we ready for that kind of exposure? The question is whether the world is ready, Sarah replied. But the Federation has been pushing for transparency. They believe secrecy creates the wrong foundation for long-term cooperation. Deep Singer approached the group with that fluid grace that had become familiar. Surface dweller politics often require deception, for stability. Deep current politics require transparency for trust. These approaches create incompatibility. Dr. Santos looked up from her research data. From a psychological perspective, the public revelation could actually strengthen the program. The K9 partnerships demonstrate that interspecies cooperation is not only possible, but beneficial. People love dogs. Seeing them work successfully with aliens might ease a lot of fears. Tank considered the implications. What about security? There are going to be groups that see the Federation as a threat, regardless of their peaceful intentions. Tide Caller's patterns brightened with what might have been amusement. Surface Dweller Tank, we have been sharing your oceans for millennia. If we intended harm, your species would have discovered it long ago. Spider raised another concern. What about other nations? China, Russia, the European Union, they're going to demand their own access to Federation technology and cooperation. Sarah had been working on this issue for months. That's actually part of the plan. The Federation wants to establish cooperation centers on every continent. They're thinking globally, not nationally. Deep Singer nodded confirmation. Planetary ecosystem restoration requires planetary cooperation. National boundaries are surface dweller constructs that do not reflect oceanic realities. Tank realized they were talking about something far beyond an alliance between the United States and an alien civilization. You're talking about reshaping global politics. We are talking about survival. Deep Singer replied simply. Your species has approximately 15 to 20 of your years before ecosystem collapse becomes irreversible. This timeline requires unprecedented cooperation among surface dweller nations. The weight of that statement hung heavy in the room. Tank looked at Reaper, who was calmly observing the conversation, and wondered what kind of world his K9 partner would inherit. Dr. Santos broke the silence. The Federation's data on climate change is more accurate than anything our scientists have produced. They've been monitoring oceanic systems for centuries. If they say we have 15 years, we probably have less. Sarah made a decision that would define the rest of her career. Then, we move forward with full disclosure. The world needs to know what we're facing and what help is available. Bulldog nodded grimly. I'll coordinate with Washington on the announcement protocols. But we should prepare for massive pushback from groups that prefer the status quo. Tank petted Reaper thoughtfully. What happens to us? To the original team? You become the foundation of a new kind of diplomacy, Sarah replied. Human Canine Federation cooperation teams working around the world to build understanding and implement solutions. Deep Singer's patterns shifted to what the team had learned indicated deep respect. The warrior partners who made first contact will always hold honored positions in Federation memory. Your courage and adaptability made cooperation possible. Tide Caller approached from the research area, carrying data tablets that showed oceanic restoration projections. We have completed preliminary models for global cooperation scenarios. If surface dweller nations achieve coordination levels similar to this facility, ecosystem restoration can begin within one surface year. Tank studied the projections with amazement. And if they don't achieve coordination, Tide Caller's patterns darkened. Then, both our civilizations prepare for survival in a dramatically altered world. Sarah felt the full weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The program that had begun with Tank throwing her into a pen with an aggressive dog had evolved into humanity's last, best hope for planetary survival. Spider voiced what everyone was thinking. No pressure there. Deep Singer's expression might have been a smile. Surface Dweller Spider. Pressure creates either diamonds or collapse. We believe your species has diamond potential. Tank looked around at the facility that had become his second home, watching humans and Federation delegates work together with their K9 partners to solve problems that neither species could address alone. 6 months ago, he'd been a skeptical SEAL who thought he knew everything about pack dynamics and military operations. Now he was part of something that would echo through history forever. Admiral, he said to Sarah, using her new rank with pride. What are our orders for the public announcement? Sarah smiled, remembering the mild-mannered liaison officer she pretended to be during those first crucial days. The same as they've always been, Chief Rodriguez. We trust the dogs to show us the way forward. Reaper barked once, as if agreeing with the assessment, then settled back down between Tank and Deep Singer. The three species, human, canine, and aquatic, had found common ground in their shared commitment to survival and cooperation. As the sun set over the Pacific, casting golden light through the facility's observation windows, Tank realized that he'd been part of something unprecedented in human history. They'd encountered alien intelligence and responded not with fear or aggression, but with partnership and hope. The future remained uncertain, with challenges that would test every aspect of a human Federation alliance. But for the first time since learning about the environmental crisis facing both civilizations, Tank felt genuinely optimistic. After all, if a skeptical seal and his attack dog could learn to work with aquatic aliens, maybe humanity really did have diamond potential. The howling of K-9S echoed across the facility as the night shift began, joined by the harmonious responses of their Federation partners. It was a sound that spoke of understanding across species, cooperation across differences, and hope for a future that both civilizations could share. Tank listened to the interspecies chorus and smiled. 6 months ago, he'd mocked a small woman who,